Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. When I sat down with Jeff Richard, we got talking about some of the alternative media forms that Chaosium has been involved in over the years, like board games, video games, and even comic books. I'm going to jump over to an interview with Jeff where we talk about some of those things. But first, subscribe to the Chaosium YouTube channel. It helps us a lot and it lets us make more content like this. Thanks. Well, we've talked about role playing, but you also mentioned some other interesting things. You talked about some of the board games and video games that Chaosium is involved in. I want to talk about some of that, but first, is there obviously Chaosium started as a board game company and has had its hands in all kinds of different mediums. As the creative director for Chaosium, is it important for you to keep the company's involvement in all kinds of different media, or
Yes.
yeah?
Yeah. Just to jump in. Chaosium is an unusual publishing company because we are, to a very large extent, a creator-driven publishing company. We actually own our IP, and so although our primary media is role-playing games, we started as a board game company, and board games give you an interesting look on stories that can feed into role-playing games and vice versa. And other media like fictional novels, encyclopedias of fictional worlds. So the Guide to Glorantha, you tell me what kind of a product that is. Or the Peterson's Guide. Is that a role-playing game supplement? Is that an art book? Is it, James, what would you say it is?
Gosh, an enormous paperweight. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think certainly it's that too.
I've got it on my shelf, and to me, it always spoke to me of how RuneQuest itself is something that is nebulous and hard to define. It is, at the same time, a world. It's a place for you to be a hero. It's a place for you to experience these myths, and it's kind of a myth in its own right. So I think that really conveys a lot about the setting. Yeah.
Yeah. The guide is a giant paperweight. It's an encyclopedia. It's a coffee table book. It's it's the thing related to your fantasy that you can safely put on a coffee table, and people that know nothing about it will look at it. It's also to me, it's also an experimental art piece. There's an Italian encyclopedia about a fictional realm from the late 1980s, or early 1990s, and I'm spacing on the name, but it was an influence on when I started putting together the guide. It's all of these things, and I think that playing around with products and pieces of art that can be multiple things depending on what the reader or the user wants it to be is one of the strengths of Chaosium products. You look at in my opinion, another great example of that is the Peterson's Guide, which is always has been one of my favorite Call of Cthulhu supplements. But it's not really a role-playing game supplement. But when I run Call of Cthulhu, I always keep it handy because it's this great resource. But it's also just a cool thing. It's a guide like those. Like the actual Peterson's Guide for guides to birds and other wildlife for the Cthulhu mythos. And this is one of the things that I think has always been, important for Chaosium in creating products, is that we have things that straddle more than one category.
Absolutely. Well, so let me fire a question at you then about the forms of media. Obviously, we've just talked about how Chaosium has experimented with so many different types of things, and I was looking the other day at the fine sculptures that have just won some awards
from Eric Vanel, that fantastic jarreel.
Exactly. Is there a medium or a art form that you would love to see Glorantha or Chaosium lean into that maybe it hasn't had the chance to yet, or hasn't had the chance to as fully as you would like to see yet?
Well, I mean, I'm really excited to being able to do a traditional uh, video game RPG approach for Glorantha. I'm really excited about doing that. But other things that I absolutely would love playing around with. I would love to do a Gloranthan or a RuneQuest comic book. I would totally love that. I would love. I mean, in an ideal world. I mean, wouldn't it be awesome to be able to have a 5 series streaming RuneQuest series or Pendragon series. I mean, I suspect that with Pendragon we could do an awful lot better job telling the story of Arthur than the last 25 years of mediocre TV series and movies. And I think that
It would definitely. I'd watch the hell out of a long form Pendragon campaign. That's for sure.
and the other one that would be fun. I mean, for all of these, I would love us to. I'd love to be able to work with somebody for comic books, and that's already something that's been in talks. And I've done a little bit of one 5-6 years ago with Colin Cuddiff, and I did the Princess Sartar webcomic.
Hmm.
I love work, helping people tell cool stories in many media. And even if role-playing games, and of course my favorite media is role-playing games, because what other media do you have where you and your friends can sit around and tell your own version of the story and tell it and make it your own. It's one of the few opportunities that we have in today's world to create our own stories, and like ancient storytellers, instead of passively receiving or passively interacting with somebody else's story. So